Most self-improvement advice tells you to work harder, be more productive, and squeeze more into your day. But after spending the last 6 years studying neuroscience and understanding how the brain actually changes, I discovered that lasting change doesn't happen when your brain feels under pressure. It happens when it feels safe. And so in this video, I'm going to break down 3 simple neuroscience-backed lessons that will help you to understand your brain and habits so that you can make real change. So let's not waste any time. Lesson number 1. You need to first create safety before you create change. Because here's the thing, we live in a very busy world that constantly puts our brain under pressure. We're surrounded by notifications, deadlines, financial stress, family pressure, social media, and there's an endless stream of things telling us that we need to do more, we need to buy more, we need to achieve more, we need to be better. And all of this busyness makes us feel like we're in a constant state of urgency. It's like we're always running out of time. We have an endless to-do list which we never complete. We're always keeping busy, jumping from one task to the next, and our mind is always stimulated. And when this happens for a long period of time, our brain starts to live in a chronic state of stress. And this means making a change in our life becomes exceptionally hard. And this is where I think, the conventional advice of work harder or do more, for a lot of people, it just simply doesn't work. Because if you're already feeling overwhelmed with life, then adding more pressure is not going to help you create change. And I see this all the time with the people I work with. In fact, I was coaching an ER doctor recently, and they had all these goals they wanted to do. They wanted to start meal prepping for the week ahead. They wanted to start studying every evening, and they couldn't understand why they kept failing to make a change. But when we looked at their current situation, they were so stressed, always jumping from one task to the next, and they never took a moment to practice self-care. And so it's no wonder that they were struggling with their goals, because their brain was not in the right state to prioritize self-growth. And if we think about this from like an evolutionary perspective, it actually makes a lot of sense, because your brain's first priority has always been about survival. And so if, for example, thousands of years ago you went out for a walk and you saw a lion, well, that would not be the time to start studying or start learning a new skill, but your brain is focused on keeping you alive. And those same survival mechanisms that kept us alive thousands of years ago are still active in our brain today. The difference is that today our threats aren't usually physical dangers, but they're things like worrying about paying the bills, pressure at work, relationship problems, or having an endless to-do list. And so what you need to understand is that when your brain is constantly stressed, it's using all its energy to scan for threats. And a good example of this is if you are someone who experiences anxiety and you constantly think of worst case scenarios and you constantly think, what if this is going to happen and what if this is going to happen, and you're preparing for bad things to happen, that is a very clear example that you are stuck in a stressful state. And so this means your brain has less energy for growth, for learning, or for creating meaningful change. And so therefore, the first step to change is to create safety. And so, if being constantly stressed is stopping us from creating change in our lives, the obvious question then becomes, how do we create safety? How do we shift our internal state? Well, don't you worry. I'm going to give you all the secrets and the answers. So this leads us into lesson number 2. Your nervous system controls your ability to change. So your nervous system is the communication system between your brain and body. And it is constantly taking in information from the world around you and helping your body to decide how to respond. And so your nervous system plays a huge role in determining your internal state and whether you feel calm and safe or stressed and under pressure. And it does this through the 2 main branches of the nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic nervous system is also known as your fight or flight response, and this is when your brain thinks you're under threat. And this could happen because of anything. Maybe you see something on the news that makes you feel scared, maybe you got an angry text from your boss, maybe you got a bill in the post, and suddenly your heart starts to beat a bit faster and you become more alert and your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. But then we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also known as your rest or digest. And this is when your brain and body slow down and recover. and your breathing becomes clearer, your heart rate slows down. This is the state where you feel safe and you can now relax and go to bed, and it gives your brain and body a chance to heal and recover. And I just want to make it clear that neither of these systems are bad, because we actually need both to survive. Like, if you're in danger, your sympathetic nervous system helps you to survive. The problem happens when we spend too much of our lives stuck in that state. And unfortunately, this is the state which the majority of people live in, which is why we find it so hard to create real change. Because when stress becomes our default, our bodies and minds never get the chance to recover, and we live in a constant state of feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. And so let's look at 4 simple ways you can help shift into the rest and digest state so that you can create safety and feel better. Number 1 is sleep, and probably the most important way to regulate your nervous system. Because when you're sleep deprived, your brain and body becomes way more sensitive to stress, and it becomes harder to regulate your emotions or respond calmly. And so honestly, you should treat sleep like it is sacred. No screens before bed, no caffeine in the afternoon. You want to start going to bed at the same time every night and aiming for at least 7 to 9 hours every night. Now, the second way is breathing. When you practice slow and controlled breathing, this signals to your body that you are safe and it is okay to relax. This is why practices like breath work can be so powerful, because if you were to just take a few minutes each day to slow down your breathing, this gives your body a chance to move away from stress and return to a calmer state. Now, the third way is movement. Because stress isn't just mental, but it's physical, as it creates a physical response in the body. You know, we hold so much tension in our shoulders, we feel anxious in our stomach, we feel angry in our hands. And so moving your body is one of the best ways to help release that built-up tension. And it can be as easy as going for a 30-minute walk outside, doing some yoga, or doing some gentle stretching. And the fourth way is to reduce constant stimulation. So as I explained before, and I talk a lot about this on my channel, when your brain is constantly being stimulated, TV, the news, radio, podcasts, music, emails, notifications, you never get a chance to turn off. And it is keeping your brain and your mind and your body in a constant state of alertness. And so in order to give your nervous system a chance to reset, you need to create space. Space for silence, space for quietness, space for stillness. And this will help you to get into that parasympathetic state. And so the reason we're going through all of this is because once you learn how to regulate your nervous system, you create an internal state where change becomes much easier. Right, this is what a lot of people don't understand. Like, you cannot consistently be disciplined, have good habits, make good decisions, think clearly if you are constantly stressed, or your body constantly believes that you are in danger. And so instead of trying to add more or do more or be more, your first priority should be to practice nervous system regulation. And so it's important to prioritize your sleep, control your breathing, go outside for movement, and reduce constant stimulation. Now, the final lesson, number 3, is that your bad habits are not the problem, your state is. Because I'm going to assume that there is something in your life you want to change. Maybe you find that you drink too much on the weekend, or you scroll for 8 hours of the day, or you're addicted to video games, or you're always eating junk food. But we all have something that we want to move away from, right? We want to stop doing this negative habit. But here's an insight that I hope will help you. Most of the bad habits you do aren't actually the real problem. The real problem is that they're often attempts to regulate how you feel in the moment. As we've just discussed, we live in a world that is so stressful, so busy, so many things going on, so many things happening. And so what do we do when we feel stressed, or anxious, or lonely, or bored, or mentally exhausted? We rely on our phone. We eat the junk food. We drink the drink. We smoke our cigarette, we have the vape, we turn to video games. And this is because our brain is trying to look for some sort of relief to change how we feel. But the problem is, these behaviors only provide temporary relief. That drink or donut might make you feel better for a moment, but they don't address the stress that caused them in the first place. And so what happens is we get addicted to temporary reliefs, right? We live in a society where no one's ever taught us how to handle our emotions in a healthy way, how to regulate our emotions. And so when we feel that stress, when we feel that boredom, we just whip out our phone. We start playing video games. We do a behavior that doesn't actually make it any better, but it just offers us a tiny bit of relief. And then it becomes a vicious cycle where our brain learns that, oh, this makes me feel a little bit better. So we go back to it again and back to it again. All the while, the stress that is actually causing it is not actually being dealt with. And this is literally why people go into ruts or depression. Because when we rely on these coping mechanisms again and again and again, over time, they create further problems. Right? If I keep eating donuts every time I don't feel good, well, a few months down the line, now I've gained weight. Now my mental health is worse. Now I have no energy. But I have no other way to deal with my emotions, and so I keep running back to the same coping mechanism, which is actually causing me more stress. And it becomes a vicious spiral. And so this is why so many people struggle to change, because they try to remove the behavior without addressing the state that created the behavior. And so I hope you now understand that when you learn to regulate your nervous system, you create the conditions for your brain to think clearly, make good decisions, and it's now able to learn and grow. But we can't do that when we are stuck in survival mode. And so I hope this video helped you out. Check out this other video on nervous system regulation if you would like to learn more, and I will see you in the next video. All the best.